Guys, welcome to the third episode of the Anything But Everything podcast. I thank you everyone who's tuning in. If you guys want to listen to the first and second episode, I'll leave the links for you guys in the description below. If some of you haven't heard of the Anything But Everything podcast and are in the dark about what the podcast is all about, there'll be a link in the description below. Today I have a guest with me, but before I introduce my guest, I kind of want to give a short 30-second story. So just to show everyone how far we've come in regards to people talking about mental health and how much it started trending over the last couple of years. About a week ago, I went to my doctors for a regular checkup, and all of a sudden they check my pulse and how I'm breathing and all that. At the very end, they started asking me a whole bunch of questions, such as, do you feel like you're a failure? Do you feel like you've let your family down? Are you able to focus when you're doing an activity? So they asked me all these questions, and at the very end I go, what's this all for? And they tell me that now it's not exactly state law, but it's highly recommended by medical groups for doctors to question their patients, to question if they're depressed, if they're kind of stressed out, or what's going on. So just another proof of how mental health is now slowly becoming a trend on social media around the world. And if this podcast can maybe be a catalyst, or can be a driving point for that, it's more than good with me. So anyway, guys, we're on the third episode. As I said, I'm here with a very good friend of mine, a very good buddy of mine. I've known the guy for a while. He's such a great guy. We've always had a lot to talk about. He's here. And Danny, how you doing? Welcome to the Anything But Everything podcast.
Thank you. I'm actually very excited. The first time you told me at work, you were like, oh yeah, I want to do a podcast. And I remember that just glow on my face. So I was like, oh, I want to be a guest. I want to be on it.
Yeah, I remember that. I got to say, before we get started, I got to say you were one of the main supporters. I can remember when I was trying to get my equipment. You're like, hey, man, what happened with that podcast? When we doing it? What's going on? And I told you, I said, hey, man, and, in due time, I'll definitely have you. So once again, thank you for being here. I mean, it's really a pleasure. We're actually here to discuss something really, really interesting. You've said that you've had a fascination with time. You almost, I think you said, your whole life.
Yeah, actually, I always have had that fascination with time. It's always been such an interesting concept to me, how fast it goes, how slow it goes. The concept of time travel has always been really interesting to me.
Well, what part is it that just really hooked you and gets you? What is it that, you say time is just, it's this? Because it was roughly about a year and a half ago where I separately discovered that time is probably the most powerful entity in the world. So where was that start point where you said, oh my God, there's something interesting about this time concept?
I think my first fascinating moment with time, I want to say I was maybe 13, 14 years old. And I had just gotten serious with my first, kind of real relationship.
Right.
And I thought everything was going good, and like a month went by and we broke up and I was really hurt. But then it hit me and it made me realize, I was like, wow, a month went by and I didn't really get to know this person,
Right.
How much time went by, and the only time I really spent with her was in school. We never really hung out outside of school. We never really got to meet each other's families or anything like that. So it hit me that I had no time for her, or she had no time for me.
Right.
So then, that's when I started realizing, I'm like, holy shit, time is an amazing thing. And even now that I'm an adult, I still look back at it and I'm baffled by it.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of cliches about time. Time heals all wounds. Time is flying by and all this. Do you believe in all that, or what's your take on all that?
Oh, completely. I completely believe in that. I can still, remember being in elementary school. I still remember some of my best friends. I still remember my teacher's name. God, fucking Mrs. Mouskewitz. So, I still remember those things. And we're talking, this is years later.
Right.
So, yeah, time really does fly by.
I gotta say, I've always lived with the thing that, sometimes there's people out there who think, they, want to go back to school, or they want to do some kind of, endeavor, but they feel like, the time for that has passed. Do you believe it's ever too late to do something? Do you feel like time ever becomes an enemy in that way, that time has come and gone?
To an extent, yes and no. Because I feel you're never too old to learn something, to do something or experience something. But at the same time, time's a bitch.
Right.
You know, it catches up to everyone. Our bodies don't last forever, and little by little, it affects us all in different ways. Family leaving us, you know, emotions, your body people changing, exactly.
You know, people say that, you know, roughly around, you know, when the new millennium hit, time has just been racing by, whereas to before it really wasn't like that. Do you think maybe it's been increase in technology, or maybe are we much more busier than before because everyone's got to work? Or because, you know, I'm sure you can agree, time is just, it's already in the middle of 2017.
Oh yeah, it all comes down to technology taking up so much of our time, and you know, we're all glued to a screen, whether we like it or not, or whether we admit it or not. In some aspect, technology has rolled over each and every one of our lives. And same thing with work. In some aspect, you know, like me, for example, I'm a big workaholic. I talk to my friends, and one of my friends, she's always telling me, oh, let's hang out, let's go do this, let's go do that, and sorry, I'm at work. And she's told me point blank, you're always at work. So, yeah, I can totally agree to that for us, time's moving so quickly, but we're distracted with all these other little things that we don't realize it.
I can remember roughly, it was about, you know, a month ago, I saw this video on Facebook, really interesting, where it said, you know, a lot of people, you know, they think back to themselves like, oh, so-and-so did this with their life, I still haven't done that, or, you know, they've reached this point in life where I haven't. And the video went on to show that, you know, you're never too late and you're never too early. When you do something, it's because that was the moment that you needed to do it. That was the destined time. That was where, you know, fate had it.
I don't know, in that aspect, that's kind of tough. I've always been, you know, a guy of science more than faith.
Right.
You know, but that's not to say I disagree with, you know, destiny, quote unquote, or anything like that. Because sometimes you can't explain shit. Sometimes, you know, this happened for a reason. What reason? God knows.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really tough one to say. And back to going, you know, when you were saying so many people have done things with their lives, what have I done? A perfect example of that, I have a buddy of mine from high school who was a year younger than me.
Right.
Who just got a job with NASA.
Wow.
And this is a 100% true story. He just got a job with NASA.
How old is he?
I'm 23, he's 22.
Okay.
So he just got this job at NASA, and he posted on Facebook, and he was super excited, and I messaged him, and I told him, you know what, good for you, dude. But then I sat there, and I started realizing, I'm like, what the hell did I do with my life so far? I'm like, I graduated high school, and I went straight to working. That was it. But then sitting there, I was like, you know what, at the same time, I haven't done much, you know, that time since graduating, or since God knows when.
Right.
But the things I have done, I'm happy with.
There's always, especially now with social media and the dynamic of social media, there's always that comparison. I feel like, you know, when people post something, immediately we go in our heads and we're like, so-and-so is, you know, in that example, so-and-so is in NASA, and I'm just working.
Oh yeah, I would completely agree. We're a species that always is comparing one another. You know, even if you say, I don't compare myself to other people, in some aspect we always kind of do.
So, you know, and you also, you know, we should also mention this, you have a tattoo of, you know, what is it?
I got a pocket watch on my forearm. Yeah.
Go ahead and explain, you know, what's that all about?
So again, this all revolves around my fascination with time. And one of the objects that always catches my eye are watches. You know, whenever you watch any kind of time travel movie, or they're experiencing, you know, how fast time goes by, they'll flash forward to like a clock and you see the hands moving so quickly or slowly or whatever. So I got that in symbolism of, you know, I love that factor. I think it's such an interesting object is time. So I got that tattooed on me just to describe that, you know, just to show it off. And it's actually set for my parents' and my brother's birthday.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I can remember the first time I saw it, because I really didn't know you back then. When I talked to you, you said, you know, I got this fascination with time, and I thought, you know, for all the people out there who might think that, you know, time is going by, you know, I'm not doing anything. I mean, what would be your piece of advice to anybody out there who feels like, you know, it's too late for me to do anything. It's too late for me to get up off the couch and do something just because of age or, you know, living, you know, confinements or whatever it is.
You know, I would have to say that it doesn't matter, you know. To an extent, yes, it does, but to an extent, no. Time is always going to be a factor, whether we like it or not. But at the same time, it's also a mental thing. we're going back to the whole, this is a mental
psychological
thing. Yeah, it's a
thing,
psychological thing. You keep telling yourself, I'm too old, I can't do this. I don't have enough time, I can't do this. That's all in your head. You tell yourself the opposite. Wake up a little earlier to get able to do what you want to do. A good example of this is my brother. He just went through a really tough time. I don't want to really go into specifics of it, but in the process of about maybe 2 months, he lost 40 pounds.
Wow.
So he was always telling himself, I don't have time for this. He works 2 jobs, for Christ's sakes. He was like, I don't have time for this. And unbelievably, he found time. He started waking up earlier to go do these things. He said, you know what? I'm going to get up on my days off and go and do these things. So as tough and as difficult as it may be to say, oh, I can't do it, you got to kick yourself in the ass and be like, yeah, I can do it.
So I honestly agree with that. Sometimes I feel like time is one of those things where we kind of look at it as a barrier. If we feel like, if we were supposed to do this, 2 years ago and we're doing it now, we kind of put up that barrier that, the time for that has come and gone.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of times where people think that, if they're aging, once again, that time is running out. Point blank, is age just a number?
Yes.
Why?
Because it just doesn't express who you are in a sense. I feel I'm 23, but I feel I'm a lot more mature in some aspects than others. And a perfect example of that would be at work. All the time, whenever I'm talking to a customer, or even some of our coworkers, I'm talking to them and they've told me point blank, you don't act your age. You're so much different than what other people your age are. And I take that as a big compliment, because I've seen some other people, who are roughly around our age, and some of the way they act is just so different. It might be just because of how I was raised, or I don't know, but it throws me completely off guard. And same aspect with, I've seen and met some older people who don't act their age. My dad is one. He just turned 50 a couple days ago. And
happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday, Dad. And he just turned 50 a couple days ago. And even though, yes, he is older, yes, I see it in his face, he's tired and things like that, he shocks me sometimes on some of the things he does do. I'm like, wow,
you find the time and energy for that.
Yeah, and it's just a complete shock sometimes. So, yeah, time's just a number in my eyes.
I got to share a personal story here since we're sharing stories. I knew someone 83 years old.
Wow.
And he recently passed away. When I saw him, you look at him, and back then he was maybe 78, 77. But I looked at him and I'm like, Jesus, this guy is, he looks like he's 50 years old, just because he was always busy with something. Didn't matter what it was. He never, there's some people that just don't like to sit down. They need to be they have to be moving around all the time.
Oh, yeah.
As we slowly wrap up, I want to close with a cliche that we hear all the time, and that's time heals all wounds. Do you believe in this? Why? And do you have a personal example to share?
Yes, I do believe in this. And personal example, I'll actually share 2.
Okay.
One will be mine, one will be my brother's example.
Okay.
So my example would be, I would have to say my senior relationship out of high school. All high school, all 4 years, I was in love with this chick. I was head over heels, and, she would ask me to jump off a bridge. I would tell her which one. It was that bad. But, so senior year came, gone. It was really fun. And, we graduated. I'm working. She's working. And, we didn't have any time for each other. I was trying to put that effort out there, and she wasn't. And she broke up with me. And it hit me really hard. And I was so depressed about it. But, I was able to sink myself in my work. And thank God it was right around the holidays.
Okay.
So I was super busy with work, and next thing I know, it went from her breaking up with me in late November, early December, to now being February. And I was just shocked. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, what happened to the time?
Yeah.
What happened to all these days? I thought I was thinking of her constantly. And next thing I know, months went by, and not a thought of her had ran past my mind.
Wow.
So yes, time did help me get past that.
Did you do any healing along the way too? Did you like do any coping mechanisms? Did you, or was it just time was just flying?
Actually, believe it or not, I did talk to some friends. I actually talked to my mom a lot, because at the time I was living with my mom, and she was a big support system for me. She was really helpful for me.
Really important, guys. I can't stress it enough. You know, one of the greatest things you can do for yourself is, if you can find somebody to talk to, don't keep that bottled up inside, because it eventually, it gets worse as time goes on.
Oh yeah. That's I'm a big advocate for that as well. If you're dealing with some kind of issue, please find someone to communicate with. There's no harm in asking for help. That's a big number one.
And once again, time does heal all wounds. As much as, some people don't want to believe, yeah, you might get scarred sometimes, and that scar is always going to be there. But as time goes on, I can remember someone telling me it's not about total elimination, it's about decreasing,
Ooh,
if something's going on. Because here's the thing, no matter what, sometimes you could be sitting down and you remember something completely random. That thought, is still there. It comes maybe once in a blue moon, but it's there. So it's not totally eliminated.
Oh, yeah.
But there's that frequency that you can decrease.
Oh, yeah.
So now, your second example.
So my second example actually revolves around my brother and myself. Unfortunately, my brother went through a very tough time. He ended a very long-term relationship. Issues happened, and unfortunately, they broke up. And for a long time, my brother was just depressed. He was very, very down in the dumps, and no matter what I tried, I would cheer him up for maybe a day, maybe two, and the next thing I know, he's crying again.
Right.
And as much as I tried, and as much as my mom and my dad and all of our family tried to reach out and tried to help him, I realized that I couldn't do anything that he couldn't do for himself. So I was kind of rough on him, and I told him, you know what, you need to suck it up, because whether you like it or not, she's moving on. You got to move on with your life. So little by little, he has been moving on, and I'm very happy to say he is now, seeing other people. He's in another relationship, and he's doing so much better with himself.
Awesome.
And I'm really happy about that. And it just goes to show he needed that time, yes, to cope, and he needed that time to feel depressed, but then he realized, I have to move on.
Right. It's funny you bring that up, because one last thing that I want to touch on is, do you believe that sometimes you have to go through a negative to get a positive out of it?
Yeah, completely. You can't see the good without having some kind of experience in the bad.
Some really powerful stuff about time. Once again, Danny, I really want to thank you for being here.
Dude, it's a pleasure. I love it.
So that, guys, that wraps it up for the third episode of the Anything But Everything podcast. Once again, hopefully you guys were able to take away something from today's episode. Maybe if you too have a fascination with time, or maybe you feel like it's too late to do something, I can tell you it is not. And once again, Danny will be my advocate for this one. No matter when it is, all you need is to just get up and get out there and make things happen. I know it's sometimes much more easier said than done, but with the proper motivation, once again, maybe talking to a family member or a friend, they can give you that extra bit of motivation that is needed to get out there and make things happen. So once again, Danny, thank you so much for being on the third episode. I thank you guys for tuning in. Once again, hopefully you guys can take something away from today's episode. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys all next time.